A story about gun violence. From a young age, everybody knew that Leon would one day become a strong young man. Leon always had dreams of playing college ball, and soon his dreams would become a reality. He always gave 110% in everything he did. Leon was a senior at Newman Gordy High School with a full basketball scholarship to Duke University. Once hearing about this news, he went and told everyone, especially his coach, Mr. Richardson. Leon had always seen Mr. Richardson as a father figure in his life. Mr. Richardson was so pleased to see that the boy who would once fight all the other kids on the block had turned to such a fine, confident young man. Before leaving his office, Mr. Richardson had told Leon that if he had ever been in need of anything, just come and ask him. While others seemed to be quite proud of Leon and his newfound success, others were not, more specifically Daniel. Daniel had always hated Leon since the day they first met. Daniel had been kicked out of school twice for possessing a weapon on school grounds. One day though, Leon had overheard Daniel talking about him, saying things like he'll kill him or even murder his family, but this didn't scare Leon. Later that afternoon, Leon had decided to walk home with his friend Joseph. Joseph and Leon had been best friends for a long time. Joseph and Leon were so close that the only thing that could possibly separate them was the fact that they were going to two different colleges. No matter what the problem was, Joseph always seemed to have advice for Leon. As they continued to walk home, they had then seen Daniel and his group of friends walking back in the same direction. Just as Daniel and his group of friends started walking towards Leon, Joseph stepped in the way, staring at Daniel deep into his eyes as though he wanted to start a fight, but Daniel had just backed away. As Joseph looked back at Leon, he could see that Leon was paralyzed with fear. Leon was so frightened, he didn't know what to do with himself. But then he remembered what Mr. Richardson had told him. But Joseph had only shot down that idea, telling Leon that there was no point in asking for Mr. Richardson's help, saying that a man should be able to fix his own problems, even if he didn't start them. Although Leon didn't completely agree with what Joseph had just said, he had respected his opinion as always. But Leon kept wondering to himself, how could he be man enough to fix a problem that he didn't even create? A couple weeks later, only to his surprise, does Leon find out instead of attacking Leon directly, Daniel and his friends decided on just beating up Joseph. As Leon rushed to the hospital to find Joseph, he was already asleep. The doctor told him not to worry, for he'd only had broken 2 ribs and sprained his ankle. As he left the hospital, he'd only started to fear for his own life more and more. But at the same time, he'd been filled with not only fear, but anger as well. He had felt as though everyone had been praising the man that he had always aspired to become, instead of the boy that he actually was. But no more. Tonight he would finish what he should have stopped a long time ago. As he was getting closer to coming back home, his mind was set on finding the gun that his mom had hidden in her room. After 2 hours of rummaging through his mother's room, he'd finally found it under her bed, wrapped in a piece of cloth. As he held the gun in the air, he began questioning himself. Did he really want to kill somebody? But then the thoughts of Joseph lying in a hospital bed came back to him. And then he was soon filled with anger again. As he sat the gun down back on his mother's dresser, he began cleaning the room, then rushed down the street. He had ran through every street, corner, alleyway, until he came across Daniel leaving the corner store. Seeing that Daniel was vulnerable at the time, he began chasing at him. Without his friends to back him up, Daniel decided to run away, but this only made Leon angrier. Running out of ideas, Daniel decides to run into an alleyway. As Leon begins to walk closer and closer to Daniel, Daniel begins to cry, screaming sorry. Sorry for what he had done to Joseph, and sorry for all the things that he had done to him. But it was too late. Leon had made up his mind. Leon became more and more ready to pull the trigger, until something went on in his head. He had stopped for a second, looking back at the gun. He had then realized that by killing Daniel, he would be no better than him. In fact, he'd be worse than him. Realizing the grave mistake that he could have committed, Leon decides to just warn Daniel never to mess with either him or Joseph ever again. Hearing this, Daniel decides to run away. As Leon looks at the gun, he begins to cry, realizing that this wouldn't make him a man. He then decides to return back home, put away the gun, and go back to Mrs. Richardson's office on Monday morning. Leon was smart enough not to pull the trigger, but if he had, his dreams of becoming a college basketball player would have been gone in an instant. Actions may speak louder than words, but never at the cost of another's life. We gotta start making changes. Learn to see me as a brother instead of two distant strangers. And that's how it's supposed to be. How can the devil take a brother if he's close to me? I let it go back to when we played as kids, but things changed. And that's the way it is. Come on. That's just the way it is. Things will never be the same.